"You don't get it," the billionaire said coldly. "People like you don't win against people like me." The young waitress standing at the plaintiff's table looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, bruises of exhaustion. But even then, she refused to look away from him. Judge Judy slowly lowered her reading glasses. "Sir," she said carefully, "you're already starting off badly." The billionaire barely reacted. Expensive navy suit, silver hair perfectly combed back, a watch worth more than most cars. Richard Holloway looked less like a defendant and more like a man arriving for a television interview. Confident, relaxed, untouchable. At least that's what he believed, the audience whispered as Judge Judy reviewed the case file. Then she looked up. 23 years old? She asked the young woman. "Yes, Mom. And your name?" "Emily Carter." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "And you're suing Mr. Holloway for wrongful termination, intimidation, harassment, emotional distress, and unpaid wages." "Yes, Mom." Richard smirked immediately. "This is absurd." Judge Judy didn't even look at him. "I'll decide what's absurd." The room quieted instantly. Emily stood trembling beside her table, not because she was weak, because she was furious, the kind of furious that builds after months of humiliation. Judge Judy noticed it immediately. "Miss Carter," she said, "start from the beginning." Emily swallowed hard. 3 months earlier, she worked at Holloway Grand, one of the most expensive luxury hotels in Manhattan. Celebrities stayed there. Athletes, politicians, people who treated $1,000 rooms like pocket change. Emily worked 12-hour shifts, serving guests in the private executive lounge. The pay wasn't amazing, but the tips helped support her younger brother. After their mother died from cancer 2 years earlier, Emily became his legal guardian. She was 23 years old, trying to raise a 16-year-old boy while barely surviving herself. And for a while, she managed, until one night changed everything. Judge Judy leaned forward. "What happened?" Emily hesitated. Richard crossed his arms confidently. Then Emily finally said it. "I saw him hit an employee." The courtroom went silent. Richard laughed once, a sharp, arrogant laugh. "Oh, please." Judge Judy looked toward him slowly. "You strike me as someone who says, 'oh, please,' right before things get worse." A few people in the audience laughed nervously. Richard didn't. Emily continued quietly. "It was around midnight. One of the kitchen workers accidentally spilled wine near a private dinner event." Judge Judy frowned. "And?" Emily looked directly at Richard. "He grabbed the employee by the collar and shoved him into a wall." The audience gasped immediately. Richard shook his head. "That's a lie." Emily's voice cracked. "No, it isn't." Judge Judy looked toward Richard. "You deny touching the employee?" "I redirected him away from guests. By grabbing his collar?" Richard leaned back. "When you run a billion-dollar hospitality company, standards matter." Judge Judy stared at him blankly. "That answer didn't help you." The audience murmured louder. Emily explained that the employee Richard shoved was 64 years old, a dishwasher named Walter Green. He'd worked at the hotel for nearly 18 years. Walter had arthritis in both hands, and after Richard shoved him, he fell against a metal serving cart. Judge Judy's expression hardened. "Was he injured?" Emily nodded slowly. "He fractured his wrist." The courtroom became completely silent. Richard sighed dramatically. "The man tripped." Emily immediately snapped. "No, you pushed him." The tension exploded instantly. Judge Judy raised a hand. "Stop." Silence again. Then Judge Judy looked at Emily carefully. "Did anyone else witness this?" Emily hesitated. "Yes." "Who?" 5 employees. Judge Judy looked toward Richard. "And what do those 5 employees say?" Richard smiled calmly. "That they saw an accident." Emily looked stunned, actually stunned. Judge Judy noticed. "What?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "They changed their statements." "Why?" Emily looked directly at Richard again. "Because they were scared." Richard laughed softly. "Or because she's lying." Judge Judy leaned back slowly. "You know what bothers me already?" Richard stayed silent. You don't sound concerned about a worker getting hurt. Richard shrugged. I'm concerned about facts. No, Judge Judy replied coldly. You're concerned about liability. The audience reacted immediately. Emily wiped tears from her face and continued. 2 days after the incident, hotel management called her into a meeting. 3 executives were waiting inside. And Richard Holloway himself sat at the end of the table. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. The billionaire owner personally attended a meeting about a waitress? Emily nodded. Richard immediately interrupted. Because she was spreading damaging accusations. Judge Judy looked toward him sharply. Did you threaten her? Absolutely not. Emily laughed bitterly. The sound hurt more than crying. He told me people confuse honesty with self-destruction. Judge Judy stared at Richard. That sounds threatening. It was advice. Judge Judy blinked slowly. You billionaires really have a fascinating definition of advice. The audience laughed softly. Richard's smile faded slightly. Emily continued. He asked me to sign a statement saying Walter slipped on spilled wine. Did you? No. What happened then? Emily swallowed hard. I got fired 3 days later. Richard spread his hands confidently. For repeated policy violations. Judge Judy looked down at the paperwork, then back up. Interesting. Richard stayed calm. Judge Judy tapped the file. These violations all appeared after the incident? Yes, Richard answered. How convenient. The audience laughed again. Richard's jaw tightened slightly. Tiny crack. Judge Judy noticed immediately. Then Emily said something that shifted the atmosphere completely. The day I got fired. Her voice trembled. My brother got sent home from school because I couldn't pay his lunch account. Silence. Pure silence. Emily looked down in embarrassment. I had $32 left. Judge Judy's face softened slightly. And no severance. Emily shook her head. No final paycheck either. Judge Judy looked toward Richard instantly. Why? Richard answered smoothly. Pending investigation into stolen hotel property. Emily looked horrified. Judge Judy frowned. Excuse me? Richard folded his arms. Several bottles of premium liquor disappeared the same week she was terminated. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You accused me of stealing because I wouldn't lie for you. Richard didn't answer. And somehow that silence said everything. Judge Judy leaned back slowly. You know what's interesting? Nobody spoke. People who tell the truth usually get emotional defending themselves. Then she looked directly at Richard. But powerful people? They get irritated. The courtroom murmured again. Richard suddenly smiled. You're making assumptions about me because I'm successful. Judge Judy laughed once. No, I'm making assumptions because every answer you give sounds rehearsed by attorneys. That landed hard. Emily suddenly reached into her purse. There's something else. Richard's expression changed immediately. Tiny shift, but real. Judge Judy noticed. What is it? Emily pulled out her phone carefully. It's a recording. Richard stood up instantly. That was recorded illegally. Judge Judy pointed sharply. Sit down. He hesitated, then slowly sat. The entire courtroom leaned forward as the audio began playing. At first, there was static. Then voices. Richard's voice came first. Cold, controlled. You're a waitress, Emily. Don't confuse yourself with someone important. The audience reacted immediately. Then Emily's recorded voice. I'm just telling the truth. Richard laughed softly in the recording. No. You're threatening a company worth $4 billion because you got emotional over a kitchen accident. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. The recording continued. You have a little brother, right? Emily's recorded voice went silent. Then Richard spoke again. Life gets difficult fast when people stop cooperating. The audio ended. Nobody moved. Even Richard's attorney looked nervous now. Judge Judy slowly turned toward Richard. That sounded an awful lot like intimidation. Richard immediately straightened. It was taken out of context. Judge Judy looked disgusted. What context makes that sound better? Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The audience erupted softly. Emily wiped tears from her cheeks. For weeks I thought maybe I should have stayed quiet. Judge Judy looked at her gently. Why didn't you? Emily hesitated. Then quietly answered, because Walter couldn't afford surgery. That line hit the room like a brick. Judge Judy blinked slowly. What? Emily nodded. He lost insurance after missing work. His wrist got worse. He can barely hold a coffee mug now. Richard looked annoyed again. Not guilty. Annoyed, Judge Judy noticed instantly. And now she looked angry. You know, she said coldly. Most decent people would show at least a little compassion by now. Richard finally snapped slightly. You think businesses survive by operating emotionally? Judge Judy fired back immediately. No, but human beings survive by acting human. The audience applauded before the bailiff quieted them. Richard rubbed his forehead impatiently. Then suddenly the courtroom doors opened. Everyone turned. A tall man in a gray suit walked inside carrying a folder. Nervous, sweating. Judge Judy frowned. Yes? The man swallowed hard. My name is Daniel Reeves. He looked directly at Emily, then at Richard. I was head of security at Holloway Grand. The room instantly sensed tension. Judge Judy leaned forward. And? Daniel took a deep breath. I lied during the internal investigation. The courtroom exploded. Richard stood immediately. Oh my God. Daniel ignored him completely. Judge Judy motioned him forward. You understand you're under oath? Yes, proceed. Daniel's hands shook visibly. Richard Holloway ordered security footage erased. Complete silence. Emily covered her mouth. Judge Judy stared. You personally witnessed this? Yes. Richard looked furious. That footage was corrupted. Daniel shook his head. No, sir. You told me to delete it. The audience erupted again. Richard pointed aggressively. You signed a confidentiality agreement? Daniel laughed bitterly. Yeah. And I haven't slept properly in 2 months because of it. Judge Judy watched carefully. Daniel looked emotionally destroyed. Not performative. Died. I kept seeing Walter fall over and over in my head, he whispered. The courtroom remained silent. Daniel looked at Richard. You know what scared me most? Richard said nothing. You weren't angry after you hurt him. His voice cracked. You were angry someone saw it. That line changed the room. Even Judge Judy went silent for a moment. Richard looked trapped now. Actually trapped. Then Daniel slowly pulled papers from the folder. There's more. Richard closed his eyes briefly, like he already knew. Judge Judy accepted the documents. And her expression darkened immediately. These are employee payout agreements. Daniel nodded. 3 witnesses received bonuses after changing their statements. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Richard's attorney buried his face in his hands. Emily looked stunned. Judge Judy stared directly at Richard. Did you pay employees to lie? Richard exhaled slowly. You have no understanding of how corporations manage legal exposure. Judge Judy looked disgusted. That wasn't a denial. Silence. Then something unexpected happened. Emily suddenly started crying harder. Judge Judy softened immediately. What is it? Emily wiped tears away. I almost gave up. The room quieted. Emily looked down at her trembling hands. There were nights I sat in my apartment thinking maybe people like him really do control everything. Richard looked away. Emily continued. But then Walter called me. Judge Judy listened carefully. He apologized to me. Her voice cracked completely. He said I shouldn't destroy my future trying to protect him. The audience looked emotional now, and that's when I realized something. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. What? Emily stared directly at Richard Holloway. The people with the least power are always the ones protecting everyone else. Richard's expression hardened again, but his confidence was gone now. Judge Judy could see it clearly. Then came the final blow. Daniel spoke quietly. There's one more thing I need to tell the court. Richard looked exhausted suddenly. Older, smaller. Daniel swallowed hard. The board of directors already voted to remove Mr. Holloway as CEO this morning. The courtroom exploded louder than ever before. Richard froze completely. Judge Judy blinked. You didn't know? Richard looked genuinely stunned. For the first time all day, the billionaire looked powerless. Daniel nodded slowly. The vote happened an hour ago. Richard stared forward silently, like his brain couldn't process it. Judge Judy leaned back carefully. Well, nobody spoke. That's what happens when fear stops working. Richard's face tightened, but he still said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Judge Judy picked up her ruling papers slowly. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Emily immediately broke down crying. Judge Judy continued firmly. Full damages for wrongful termination, withheld wages, retaliation, intimidation, and emotional suffering. Richard closed his eyes. But Judge Judy wasn't finished, and copies of these recordings and documents will be referred to investigators. The audience erupted again. Richard looked furious, humiliated. Judge Judy stared directly at him. You walked in here believing money made you untouchable. Richard said nothing. But here's the problem with power. Silence swallowed the room. The moment people stop being afraid of you. She glanced toward Emily. Everything collapses. Emily covered her mouth crying. Daniel looked down quietly. And Richard Holloway, the billionaire who believed nobody could challenge him, sat completely alone at the defense table while the entire courtroom watched the empire around him crumble in real time. Then Emily spoke one last time, softly. You asked me if I knew who you were. Richard slowly looked at her. Emily wiped tears from her cheeks. I do now. Silence. You're just a rich man who thought kindness was weakness. Richard stared at her. But for the first time in his life, nobody looked afraid of him anymore. Not the audience, not Judge Judy, not even the employees he once controlled. And as reporters flooded the hallway outside the courtroom, Richard Holloway finally learned the one thing money could never guarantee: respect.